You call that steak? If you're too poor to order the prime cuts, maybe you don't belong here, sneered the woman at the next table, her voice dripping with contempt. I looked up from our modest meal, eyes locking with the woman. She was dressed head to toe in designer wear, with a smug grin carving her face. My son Ethan, sitting across from me, tensed, his fork freezing midair. We were at Sonata's Summit, an upscale steakhouse that was supposed to be our treat for his latest academic achievement. I beg your pardon, I said, my tone as calm as I could muster. You heard me, she replied, not bothering to lower her voice. People like you shouldn't pretend you belong in places like this. Mom, let's just ignore her, Ethan urged, sensing my rising anger, but I couldn't let it slide. Not this time. It takes a lot of nerve to comment on someone else's choices, I said, keeping my voice steady. What makes you think you have the right? She chuckled, casting a disdainful glance at our table. Because people like you make places like this feel cheap. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the polished wood floor. Let me remind you, we paid for our meal just like you did. Respect is earned, not bought. The woman's smirk faltered, her eyes narrowing. Do you even know who I am? No, I replied, and I don't care. All I see is a miserable person trying to feel better by putting others down. Ethan stood up beside me, his face set with resolve. Let's just go, Mom. We don't need this. As we turned to leave, the woman muttered just loud enough for us to hear. No wonder you're in last place in life, always choosing the cheap cuts. I froze in my tracks, something snapping inside me. What did you say? Mom, let's just go, Ethan insisted, pulling gently on my arm. But it was too late. I was in her face before I knew it, fire in my eyes. You know what your problem is? You think money makes you better, but it doesn't. It never will. A murmured scandal buzzed through the restaurant, heads turning, curiosity piqued. And why don't you show enough class to mind your own business? I spat, feeling my voice tremble with rage. Because, she declared, I don't mingle with the common folk. Well, now you've got your chance. I stood tall. And let me tell you, a true class is kindness and respect, things you'll never have, no matter how much you spend. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. People like you can't lecture me. You're the problem, not the solution. Ethan gently tugged my arm again, pulling me towards the exit. She's not worth it, Mom. Let's go. We walked out of Sonata's Summit, leaving the whispers and judgment behind. My heart pounded, feeling every beat in my chest, and Ethan was silent. Are you okay? He finally asked as we reached the car. Yes, I sighed, taking a deep breath. But this isn't over. What do you mean? He asked, his eyes bright with concern. I mean, Veronica Mays will regret ever crossing paths with us. Determination surged through me like a wildfire. We'll show her what true class looks like. Ethan grinned. I'm with you, Mom, every step of the way. Thus, our resolve for vengeance was born, and it was going to be a journey that would change everything. The drive home from Sonata's Summit was silent, the weight of Veronica's words hanging in the air. I glanced at Ethan. His jaw was set, a determined fire in his eyes. We'll show her, he said finally, breaking the silence. I nodded. We will. Later that evening, we sat in the living room, the familiar surroundings of our modest home grounding us. I stared at the framed photos on the wall, memories of simpler times, of my parents who had taught me the value of hard work and respect. Do you remember Grandpa's stories? I asked Ethan, my voice softening at the thought. Yeah, how could I forget? He smiled. He always said that real wealth isn't in money, but in character. Exactly, I agreed. That's why Veronica's attitude infuriates me. People like her think money is everything. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Mom, we've always been in the middle, never truly poor, but never rich either, and people like Veronica prey on that. I looked at him, seeing the strength and resolve in his eyes. You're right. But this time, we'll do something about it. She needs to learn what real consequences are. He nodded. We need to be smart about this. We can't just confront her again. We need a plan. A flash of memory struck me. High school. A charity fair. Veronica and I had been classmates, though you wouldn't know it now. Even back then, her elitist behavior had been unbearable. I remembered how she'd belittled my contribution just because it wasn't wrapped in fancy paper. It's been this way for years, I said, the memory sharpening my resolve. She's always looked down on people who don't meet her ridiculous standards. Ethan's eyes shone with understanding. Then it's about time we turn the tables. Let's make a list of everything we know about her. We spent the next hour listing every bit of information, from her social circles to her role at Sonata Bank. I could feel the clarity forming a plan in our determination. There has to be a way to hit her where it hurts, Ethan said, tapping his pen against the notepad. That's right, I said. And it's not just about money. It's about her reputation. As we brainstormed, another memory surfaced. Veronica at a neighborhood block party. She'd been flaunting her latest promotion at Sonata Bank, boasting about her influence and connections. She's so proud of her position at Sonata Bank, I mused aloud. If we can prove she's unethical, it could cause her a world of trouble. Ethan's eyes lit up. Exactly. Imagine if we could find some dirt on her. A scandal, something illegal. I nodded. We need help from someone on the inside. Someone who hates her as much as we do. Ethan grinned. Mom, we've got this. We'll bring her down, piece by piece. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the past, the values my parents had instilled in me, and how Veronica had always been the antithesis of everything I believed in. The resolve in my heart hardened. For too long, people like Veronica Mays had gone unchecked, flaunting their wealth and status, crushing anyone who stood in their way. But not anymore. We'd take her down, not with brute force, but with the truth, a weapon far more potent than any amount of money could buy. Ethan and I were united in this. We were going to show Veronica Mays that she'd underestimated us for the last time. The next morning, a formal invitation arrived in the mail. It was for an exclusive community event organized by Sonata Bank. My name shimmered in elegant script on the heavy cardstock. Look at this, Ethan, I said, waving the invitation. It's for some high-profile event. Ethan glanced at it, eyebrows raised. Perfect timing. This could be our chance to get closer to Veronica and gather more information. True, I nodded, but we need to be cautious. This event will be crawling with her allies. We'll use that to our advantage, he said confidently. The more people, the more likely someone will slip up. I decided to attend, knowing it could provide the evidence we needed. That evening, I rummaged through my wardrobe, searching for an outfit that wouldn't break the bank but still looked respectable. A modest navy dress caught my eye, simple, elegant, but a reflection of my values. The day of the event, I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted my dress. Ethan gave me a thumbs up. You look great, Mom. Remember, we're here for a reason. I arrived at the event, taking in the extravagance around me. Crystal chandeliers, silver platters of hors d'oeuvres, and the murmur of small talk filled the space. I spotted Veronica near the bar, surrounded by people laughing at her every word. Taking a deep breath, I approached a group of guests chatting nearby. Interesting event, isn't it? I said, trying to blend in. One of the guests, a tall man with a sharp suit, nodded. Indeed. As we spoke, I noticed Veronica's laughter growing louder. I shifted closer, pretending to admire a floral display. You should have seen their faces, Veronica was saying, her voice dripping with satisfaction. They didn't have a clue. Another guest chimed in. Classic Veronica, always a step ahead. Of course, she replied smugly. It's not my fault if people can't keep up. Her arrogance was infuriating. I gritted my teeth, maintaining my composure. Overhearing conversations, I picked up whispers of questionable practices at the bank, subtle hints of favoritism and manipulation. Determined to dig deeper, I joined a conversation with a woman discussing Sonata Bank's latest ventures. What do you think of their investment strategies? I asked innocently. They're risky, but Veronica always seems to make it work, she replied. Really? How so? Well, she's got her ways, the woman said with a wink. Let's just say, not everything is by the book. My heart raced. This was the kind of information we needed. As I continued mingling, picking up bits and pieces, Veronica's voice again drew my attention. She was bragging about her latest triumph, practically gloating about her manipulations. Lower-class people just don't get how the world works, Veronica declared. They think playing fair will get them anywhere. My blood boiled. But I reminded myself we were here for a reason. I moved closer, noting every detail of her conversation. Evidence was piling up. Suddenly, Veronica's eyes locked onto mine. Well, if it isn't the humble diner, she sneered. I met her gaze. Enjoying the event, Veronica? Oh, quite. And you? I'm surprised you could afford to be here. I have my ways, I replied coolly. Her eyes narrowed. Don't think for a second that you belong here. We'll see about that, I said, holding her gaze. We'll see. As the night came to a close, I had gathered enough to know we were on the right track. Ethan would be pleased with the information. We were getting closer to the truth, and Veronica Mays was about to learn that underestimating us was her biggest mistake. Walking away from the glitz and glamour, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was just the beginning. The real battle had only just begun. Ethan greeted me at the door, his eyes full of curiosity. How did it go? I handed him my notes. We got a lot of useful information. Veronica was her usual vile self, but I managed to overhear some crucial conversations. He scanned through the notes, nodding. This is good, really good. We just need to find a way to expose her without getting caught ourselves. I sighed, exhaustion hitting me. We'll figure it out. We always do. The next day, I went to my part-time job at the local grocery store. The monotony was a stark contrast to the previous night's extravagance. Yet, it was a reminder of why we were doing this. Veronica's disdain for people like us was all the motivation I needed. Mid-afternoon, while bagging groceries, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, "Meet me at home ASAP. Found something." I finished my shift and rushed home. Ethan was at the kitchen table, hunched over his laptop. "What did you find?" I asked, breathless. "Remember Matthew Collins, the guy from Sonata Bank?" Ethan said, eyes gleaming with excitement. I nodded. Yeah, he seemed pretty wary of Veronica. Turns out he's got a personal vendetta against her. She screwed him over a while back, stole a big client right from under him. "How did you find this out?" I asked, surprised. Ethan grinned. A little online digging and some social media stalking. I messaged him anonymously, told him we have dirt on Veronica and want to take her down. My heart raced. And he's in. He wants to meet and talk, Ethan said, clicking away on his laptop. He might have inside information that'll help us. That evening, we met Matthew at a quiet cafe. He was cautious, looking around nervously before sitting down. "You must be Nora and Ethan," he said, extending a hand. "Let's skip the small talk. What do you have on Veronica?" I handed him my notes. He scanned through them, his expression changing from curiosity to anger. "Typical Veronica," he muttered. "She's been untouchable for too long." "We need your help to bring her down," Ethan said. "Anything you can give us would be invaluable." Matthew nodded. "I have files, emails, messages. They all point to her unethical practices. But we need to be smart about this. One misstep and she'll bury us." I leaned in, determination in my voice. "We'll do whatever it takes. She needs to face the consequences." Matthew looked at us, a serious expression on his face. "All right, I'll get you the files, but it has to be done discreetly. If Veronica finds out, I lose my job and you lose any chance of bringing her down." "Understood," Ethan said. "We'll be careful." As we left the cafe, I felt a surge of hope. With Matthew on our side, we had a fighting chance. Veronica's empire of deceit was starting to crack, and we were just getting started. Over the next few days, Matthew sent us files, each piece adding to the puzzle. Late into the night, Ethan and I pored over the documents, piecing together Veronica's web of lies and corruption. The evidence was damning. One evening, while reviewing the files, I shook my head in disbelief. She's been embezzling funds, covering her tracks with fake accounts. It's worse than I thought. Ethan nodded. "We need to make our move soon. The longer we wait, the riskier it gets." Just as we were finalizing our plan, my phone buzzed. Another text from Matthew. "Veronica's organizing an exclusive charity gala. It's the perfect opportunity to confront her publicly." I showed Ethan the message. "This is it. Our chance to expose her." He smiled, determination in his eyes. "Let's do it, Mom, for everyone she's ever wronged." In that moment, I felt the culmination of our hard work and resolve. We were ready. Ready to confront Veronica and finally bring her down. The charity gala would be our battleground. And this time, we wouldn't leave without justice. Ethan and I sat in the living room, the gathered files spread out before us. Each document was a piece of Veronica's many deceptions. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I looked over the evidence. We were close, very close. "We need a concrete plan for the gala," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "We can't just walk in and hope for the best." "You're right," I replied. "We need to ensure that when we expose her, there's no way for her to deny it." Ethan started organizing the files into a cohesive folder. Photos of fake accounts, emails, transactions. This has to be presented in a way that's undeniable. As we worked late into the night, the anticipation grew. By morning, we had a dossier that could bring Veronica's world crashing down. The evening of the charity gala arrived. I wore a simple black dress, understated but dignified. Ethan looked sharp in a suit, his expression serious. "Ready?" he asked, gripping the folder tightly. "More than ever," I replied, determination in my voice. We arrived at the gala, the venue buzzing with the chatter of well-dressed attendees. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and a string quartet played softly in the background. The opulence was staggering, a stark contrast to our mission. Veronica stood near the center of the room, surrounded by admirers. Her laughter was loud, confident. She hadn't the slightest idea what was coming. As we moved through the crowd, I spotted Matthew. He gave us a discreet nod, signaling that everything was in place. Ethan and I approached the stage set up for a speech. I took a deep breath. This was it. "Excuse me, everyone," Ethan called, his voice clear and steady. Heads turned, curious eyes fixed on us. "My mother and I have something urgent to share with you." Veronica's smile faltered, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "What is this about?" she demanded, stepping forward. "It's about you, Veronica," I answered, my voice unwavering, "and the lies you've woven." The room fell silent. Veronica's eyes narrowed. "What are you insinuating, Nora?" "Not insinuating. Proving," Ethan said, holding up the dossier. "This is a collection of evidence showing your unethical practices, embezzlement, fraud, manipulation." Veronica laughed, a brittle sound. "This is ridiculous. Utterly absurd." "Is it?" I countered, stepping up beside Ethan. "These documents don't lie. They show every illicit transaction linked to your name." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Matthew stepped forward, adding his voice. "I can verify these documents. I've seen it firsthand, and I've had enough of your deceit." Veronica's face went pale. "This is a smear campaign. Lies." Ethan opened the dossier, displaying the incriminating evidence on a projector. The crowd gasped as the proof lit up the screen. Emails, bank statements, photos of falsified accounts. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Veronica's attempts to maintain her composure wavered. This is a setup." "No, Veronica," I said, my voice strong. "This is accountability. Your reign of manipulation ends tonight." Just as Veronica began to stammer a defense, a voice cut through the crowd. It was Jim Harper, the branch manager at Sonata Bank. "This evidence is undeniable. Veronica Mays, you're immediately suspended pending a full investigation." Veronica's facade crumbled. "You can't do this. This can't be happening." But it was too late. The evidence was out, her lies exposed. Attendees began to step away from her, whispers of betrayal filling the space. As security moved in, escorting a bewildered and protesting Veronica out, Ethan turned to me. "We did it, Mom." I nodded, feeling the weight of justice finally taking root. "Yes, we did." Leaving the gala, the air felt lighter, the grip of Veronica's reign broken. Our unity and determination had prevailed, and now Veronica would face the consequences of her actions. Our lives would change, but more importantly, we had shown that truth and justice could stand tall, even against the mightiest adversaries. And that was a victory we'd cherish forever. The morning after the gala, the phone rang incessantly. I picked it up, my heart still racing from the events of the previous night. "Nora Pierce?" The voice on the other end sounded stern. "Yes, this is she," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is Jim Harper from Sonata Bank. I need you and your son to come to the bank immediately. The board wants to meet with you." My pulse quickened. "We'll be there." I hung up and turned to Ethan. "It's Jim. The board wants to see us." Ethan nodded, his face serious. "Let's go." We arrived at the bank, and it felt like walking into the lion's den. The tension was palpable. Jim met us in the lobby, his expression unreadable. "This way," he said, leading us to a large conference room where the board members were waiting. The room fell silent as we entered. Jim cleared his throat. "Nora, Ethan, thank you for coming. I'll get straight to the point. The evidence you presented last night was compelling. Sonata Bank takes these allegations very seriously." A woman at the end of the table, stern and composed, spoke up. "Veronica Mays has been suspended pending a full investigation. However, we need to understand where and how you obtained this information." Ethan stepped forward. "With all due respect, what's important is the truth. Veronica has been exploiting her position for years. We're simply exposing that truth." An older man sitting at the center leaned forward. And we appreciate that, but the bank has protocols, you understand. We need complete transparency in this process. I sighed inwardly, feeling like we were on trial. Matthew Collins provided the majority of the information. He couldn't allow Veronica's corruption to continue unchecked. Jim nodded. Matthew's cooperation will be noted, but understand, this investigation might take weeks and possibly involve legal proceedings. A knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't going to be over soon. We've done what we can. The truth is out there now. It's up to you to act on it. The board members exchanged glances, the air thick with unspoken decisions. Thank you, the stern woman said finally. You've done a great service by bringing this to light. Rest assured, appropriate actions will be taken. As we left the room, Jim followed us out. I know this isn't over, he said quietly, but you two have made a significant difference. Trust that the board will handle it from here. We nodded, a weight still lingering over us. As we walked home, the city seemed strangely distant, like we were stuck in an in-between space. Back at the house, the reality sank in. Veronica was suspended, but there were still so many loose ends. Ethan slumped into a chair, eyes tired but determined. We did the right thing, Mom. No matter what happens next, we did the right thing. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You're right, but we need to stay vigilant. Veronica won't go down without a fight. Sure enough, the news broke the next day. Veronica's suspension, the pending investigation. Social media buzzed with conspiracy theories and support for her ousting. The community seemed divided, a reflection of how deep her influence ran. Days turned into weeks, and we watched as the investigation unfolded. Veronica's face was everywhere. News outlets, blogs, public discussions. She was no longer the untouchable figure she once was. Finally, one morning, an email arrived from Jim Harper. The subject line read, Veronica May's official termination. Ethan and I read the email together. I can't believe it, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. She's actually gone. I nodded, the weight lifting from my chest. Justice, finally. But before we could fully celebrate, another message came in, a tip-off from an unknown sender, revealing more layers to Veronica's schemes that could implicate higher-ups at Sonata Bank. Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching mine. There might be more to this, Mom. Are you ready to dig deeper? I sighed, feeling both exhausted and resolute. We've come this far, Ethan. Let's see this through to the end. And so, we plunged back into the fray, determined to not only topple Veronica, but to cleanse the scars her corruption had left on the community. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about setting things right, once and for all. The media storm surrounding Veronica's suspension was unrelenting. Every channel, every blog buzzed with speculation and scandal. As Ethan and I huddled around our modest kitchen table, we knew this was only the beginning. Mom, look at this, Ethan said, pointing to his laptop screen. Headlines declared Sonata Bank's diva faces downfall and Veronica May's the end of an era. But one article stood out. It hinted at more significant corruption within Sonata Bank, suggesting that Veronica wasn't the sole perpetrator. This is bigger than we thought, I said, scanning the article. If more people are involved, we need to dig deeper. Ethan nodded, determination lighting up his eyes. I'll start by contacting our anonymous tipster. Maybe they have more information. I watched as Ethan typed away, sending a carefully worded message. Moments later, a reply came through. Meet at the old cafe downtown. Tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone. A shiver ran down my spine. It's risky, Ethan. I know, but we have no choice. We can't let this thing fester any longer, he insisted. That evening, Ethan headed to the cafe alone, while I waited at home, anxious but hopeful. I paced the living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Finally, the door creaked open, and Ethan stepped in, looking grim but determined. Well? I asked, unable to hide my anxiety. It's worse than we thought, he said, sitting down heavily. Veronica wasn't working alone. Several higher-ups at Sonata Bank are implicated. They've been embezzling money, manipulating investments, and covering their tracks. My heart sank. What are we going to do? We have to go public with this, Ethan said firmly. The community deserves to know the full extent of the corruption. The next morning, Ethan contacted a major financial news outlet, offering to share our findings. The journalists were eager to uncover the deeper layers of the scandal, We provided them with every bit of information, including the new data from our anonymous ally. Days later, a bombshell article dropped, shaking the financial world. Sonata Bank scandal, higher-ups involved in massive fraud. The article detailed everything: the embezzlement, the manipulation, the deceit. Veronica's face was plastered across the front page, but now she was surrounded by images of other implicated officials. The fallout was immediate. Sonata Bank announced an internal investigation, suspending several board members. Stocks plummeted, and the media frenzy escalated. Veronica, once the queen of her domain, was now the face of disgrace. Reporters swarmed her house, capturing every moment of her fall from grace. She tried to deny everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. Ethan received a call from the reporter he'd contacted. "Your information changed everything," they said. "We've uncovered a web of deceit that spans years. People are finally seeing the truth." It wasn't long before law enforcement got involved and Veronica's house was raided. As she was led out in handcuffs, cameras caught every second. "This is a witch hunt," she screamed, but the world had already judged her. Ethan and I watched the live coverage from our living room. "We did it, Mom," he said quietly. "We really did it." But there was one last piece to fall into place. Ethan revealed his anonymous tip to a major financial news outlet, intensifying the scrutiny on Veronica and others at Sonata Bank. The media exposure was relentless, and the community demanded justice. Veronica's colleagues, once her confidants, turned against her. "She used us," one exclaimed during a press conference. "We trusted her, and she betrayed that trust." The collapse of her empire was swift and brutal. We sat at home, watching the scandal unfold on TV. Veronica was alone, abandoned by the very people she once controlled. Ethan turned to me, a mixture of relief and determination in his eyes. "We've done our part. Now it's time for the law to take over." As the investigation continued, the community rallied behind us. People who had suffered under Veronica's arrogance came forward, sharing their stories and voicing their support. In the end, Veronica Mays faced not just legal consequences, but a complete dismantling of her life. Her wealth, once a fortress, crumbled. Her name, once respected, became synonymous with betrayal. Ethan and I sat on our porch, the sun setting in the distance. "We did it," I said, a sense of quiet fulfillment settling in. "Yes," Ethan agreed, "and we showed that no matter how powerful, the truth can bring anyone down." The days following Veronica's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions and events. The community bathed us in support, and Sonata Bank's scandal continued to unravel on the news. Ethan and I found ourselves at the center of attention, yet for once, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like justice. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting another reporter. Instead, a familiar voice spoke, trembling with uncharacteristic humility. "Nora, it's Jim Harper. I wanted to apologize." I was stunned into silence for a moment. "Jim, you don't need to." "No," he interrupted. "I do. I dismissed you at first, but you were right all along. Veronica fooled us all, but you saw through her. It took courage to do what you did." "Thank you, Jim. Your support at the end made a difference too," I said sincerely. "When this is all over, perhaps we can meet. There are discussions about restructuring, and we'd like your input on how to make things right," he offered. "I'd be glad to help," I replied, feeling a sense of closure. After hanging up, Ethan looked at me quizzically. "What was that about?" "Jim wants us to advise on how Sonata Bank can rebuild," I said, a hint of wonder in my voice. "I never thought we'd be here." A week later, we stepped into Sonata Bank's head office. The air was still tense, but there was a newfound sense of resolve. Jim greeted us, his demeanor respectful and open. "We've begun an internal audit, thanks to your evidence," Jim explained, leading us into the boardroom. "Your insights can help us ensure this never happens again." The discussions were intense but productive. Ethan and I shared our views on transparency, ethical practices, and community engagement. The plan was beginning to take shape, to transform Sonata Bank from a symbol of corruption to one of integrity. After hours of discussion, Jim walked us out. "Thank you both. This is just the beginning, but it feels like a step in the right direction." As we left the building, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. Our fight had sparked change, something that would outlast the scandal. That evening, Ethan and I sat on the porch, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. We did something good, didn't we? He asked, looking contemplative. Yes, we did. And it wasn't just about bringing down Veronica. It was about showing that truth and integrity matter, I replied. Ethan nodded. I'm proud of us, Mom. We stood up for what's right. The next few weeks flew by. Veronica faced trial, and the evidence was damning. She was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement, receiving a lengthy prison sentence. As she was led away, the media caught her final defiant glare. But for once, her power over us was gone. Her downfall was complete, and there was nothing left for her to manipulate. In the aftermath, Ethan and I continued to work with Sonata Bank, helping to implement the changes we'd discussed. The community began to heal, slowly but surely, and we found ourselves looking forward to a future free from Veronica's shadow. One sunny afternoon, as we stood outside the bank observing a community event they'd sponsored, a reporter approached us. Nora, Ethan, how do you feel now that this chapter is closing? I looked at Ethan, then back at the reporter. Relieved, I said honestly. We set out to expose injustice and make things right. It's been a long journey, but it was worth it. Ethan added, we learned that standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's necessary, and we're glad we did. The reporter nodded, her expression one of genuine respect. Thank you both for your courage. As she walked away, I turned to Ethan. How about we celebrate? He grinned. Sounds like a plan, Mom. We headed home with a sense of fulfillment that words couldn't fully capture. The journey had been tough, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but we had emerged stronger. Sitting down for dinner, I raised my glass. To resilience, to truth, and to new beginnings. Ethan clinked his glass with mine, and to never underestimating the power of standing together. We smiled, a silent understanding passing between us. Our lives had changed, not just because of what we brought down, but because of what we built up in its place. And that was a victory we could both be proud of, now and always.